We're studying James chapter 1 today. First verse is just a greeting. I think we've talked about it. So we'll just move right past it and go on to verses 2 through 4. This is a text that's kind of unusual for most of us. The value of trials. It's one that we need to learn because it helps us deal with the real world better if we understand what's coming and why it's coming our way. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. The term brethren denotes fellow believers joined to each other in love, constituting a single family with God as their Father. It's a name that is used by Christians denoting members of the same family. There are some religious people that are not our brethren and should not be acknowledged as our brethren, according to John the Apostle in 2 John verses 9 through 11. But sometimes people do. The word disciple is a believer, brother, saint, fellow laborer, beloved brother, etc. The word is used, translated this way in a number of places. Got the same Greek term, just translated differently in English, giving you an idea of the role of a disciple, what they are, what they do. What was said about this is the main thing was there's supposed to be unity in the church, and the apostles were not united. They never were. Jesus was murdered, and even at the time of his murder, his apostles still were not united. They were still divided. All of them wanted to be in the top slot. They all jockey for position. He spoke about himself as a king and having a kingdom, and they understood how a king and a kingdom operated. You got various heads of state below the king, and they all wanted to be the king and let the others be below them. They wanted to be the guy in charge. And they didn't get past that. As much as he tried to get them past it, they didn't get past it. The last time the Lord tried to get through to him was the night before he was crucified. You recall he washed the apostles' feet. And the purpose of that gesture was to demonstrate that even though he was their Lord, he was willing to serve them. And they should likewise be willing to serve one another. They were embarrassed and humiliated by the gesture, but it didn't get through to them. It didn't sink in. Eventually, I suppose they did catch on. But for a long time, they didn't give up on their hopes, and they weren't really brethren as much as they wanted to have a hierarchy of some sort, and that was heartbreaking for Jesus because he couldn't get through to them. The word count, my brethren, count, is to regard it as an occasion of joy. When you fall into these various trials, regard it or reckon it as an occasion for joy, which is challenging to say the least. Not just joy, but all joy. Most of us don't feel that way when a trial comes upon us. But this is the way we ought to summarize what's taking place. We know that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord. We know that God tests his people. so that his people will grow in faith, grow spiritually. We know that the testing of ourselves is for our benefit. We know that God does not tempt us to do evil. Whenever there's a temptation to sin, we know that God's not behind it because he has nothing to do with evil. The main thing is for us to understand that this is going to work out for our good. It's not fun. It's difficult. It's challenging. Sometimes it can be terribly painful. But ultimately, it's going to work out for our good. We know that. So we need to learn to bite our tongues, I guess, and hold on for the duration, not give in, not give up. Otherwise, the exercise we go through will be fruitless. Here you go. You're gonna go through a trial, whoever you are. There's nothing you can do about it. Let's say God's testing you. You're going to go through that test. There's nothing you can do about it. You can have a bad attitude or you can have a good attitude, one or the other. You have to make a decision. If you have a good attitude, you're going to go through the trial. If you have a bad attitude, you're going to go through the trial. Either way, you're going to go through that trial. You ain't getting out of it. The difference is, if we go through the trial with a good attitude, after the trial's over, we're better off for it. If we go through the trial with a bad attitude, after it's over, we haven't gained anything, we've lost something. It makes no sense whatsoever to buck up against God. If a trial has to be dealt with, deal with it. Get over it. You're going to have to do it. There's no way to get out of it. If God wants to put us through a test, we're going to be tested. And the best thing to do is understand why testing occurs, that it's always for our benefit. I'm not talking about solicitation to do evil. I'm talking about just a regular test of faith. It always works out for our good. We know that that's what's going to happen. We don't understand why or how, but we know it's going to happen because God promised. And the best thing to do is to bite our lip and hold on with a healthy attitude, knowing that when this is over, I'm going to be the better off for it. Otherwise, we go through this exercise and we lose ground rather than gain ground. And that's sad, because we're going to have to go through the test again. The Lord isn't just going to turn us loose. He's going to put us through another test so that we can learn whatever lesson is he wants us to learn. We need to have a healthy attitude towards these tests of faith. They're always for our sake, to help us out, to make us better. We got to go through it. And eventually, because there's a great day coming, eventually we'll look back on all that and we'll say, well, it was worth it. That's, of course, when we get to the other side of our Jordan. We'll say it was worth it. Right now, we walk by faith. I don't understand. I really don't. But I trust God, and I know he does understand. So hold on. Never give up. Never give up. This has always been very complex for me, but I think I know what the right attitude is to have. Don't have to understand everything going on in your world. You just have to know that the person in charge does know what he's doing, and everything will work out just fine. The word fall means to be encompassed about. It's not something you do on purpose. You don't go around looking for trials and say, well, I think I'll jump into this trial so I can get spiritually stronger. The word fall insinuates you weren't looking for a bad time. It just kind of happened upon you. You was really not wanting it at all, but suddenly you're encompassed about with various trials. It emphasizes that the trial is external. It's not inside, it's an external trial. Also, it comes suddenly, unexpectedly. Sometimes when everything seems to be going good for a while, snafu, and you find yourself with problems on your hands once again. And thirdly, one seems unable to escape it. You can't get out of it. That's what I said a moment ago. If the Lord puts us to the test, we have to go through the test. And there's nothing we can do about it except fail the test or pass it. That's all implied in the word fall. It's the more we understand, the better off we are. The word various means different kinds. All kinds of trials can come upon us in life. And then the word trials, of course, it can mean an inward temptation or an outward temptation. Now, this is what makes it hard. It can be either one. It can be a lust of the flesh, or it could be your car quit running, your car died. It can be internal or it can be external, either one. So how do you tell the difference? Well, the difference can only be told by the context, and we'll see that as we go forward. But without understanding the context, you can't understand whether it's internal or external. So it's important to know the difference between the two. Knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, a blessing resulting from the patient endurance of the faithful child of God while under trial. This is the end result, a blessing. Most people probably look at it as a curse. God says it's a blessing. The end result, the finished product, is going to be a blessing. The word knowing comes from the Greek term ginosko. It means to learn to know or to understand. It's to have acquired knowledge, to have acquired facts. There's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is the accumulation of facts. Wisdom is the ability to know how to deal with those facts, know how to understand them. Sometimes people acquire knowledge, but they don't know how to use knowledge. I've seen it in the wonderful world of engineers more times than I care to remember. I used to have engineers that worked for me, and there was more than a few. They knew how to compute various things, but when it come to making an application of the things they've computed, a lot of them didn't know up from down. They weren't practical. So we used two groups in one. We used an engineer, and then we used a laborer that worked with them. One of them had the book smarts, the other one had the street smarts. And between the two of them, you can get a lot done. Knowledge is a good thing to have, but if you don't know how to process the knowledge, what good is it? You got a head full of smarts, but you don't know what to do with it. That's like I've known people who have memorized the Bible. I know a Bible scholar. Well, I don't know him. He lived in the 18th century, but I read that he could he had memorized and could recite the Old and New Testament in both Greek and English. I don't think he ever mastered Hebrew in the Old Testament, but he could go from cover to cover. I've got his commentaries, and he's wrong in many of his conclusions. He's got a lot of knowledge in his head, but he didn't know how to process the knowledge. He didn't know how to put it together and draw a rightful conclusion. So all that knowledge did him little good. Knowledge is a good thing to have, but knowing how to use the knowledge, that's important too. How to think. Boy, I remember I told that to Chris one time. He was a little fella. You got to learn how to think. He had the saddest look on his face. He said, "Don't you think I know how to think, Daddy?" You know how to think, but how to process something and draw the proper conclusion, that's the difficult part. And that's one thing you want to learn. To learn, to know, to understand. I have knowledge. What do we have knowledge of? I know that the testing of my faith produces patience. I know that. How do I know that? Number one, God said so. Number two, through experience. I've experienced it. And I've learned through my experience just living life that patience is a product of knowledge. I'm much more patient now than I was when I was young. Most everybody is. You tell the difference between your children and your grandchildren. My children knew a different man than my grandchildren know. My children were never allowed to sit at my desk and work. My grandchildren have taken it over. You learn patience with time. I know that through experience. I know it through the Word of God. I know it through experience. I can say, I know that patience is a product of knowledge. I know that. Okay? So when you talk about knowing something, people say, well, I know Donald Trump. Really? I don't think any of us know Donald Trump. I don't know if his wife knows him. He's a complicated sort of fella. I've seen him on TV. I've heard him talk some. I don't know him, though. I know Rellin, but I don't know Donald Trump. I'm acquainted with Donald Trump, but I don't know Donald Trump. There's a big difference when you start talking about knowledge. Sometimes we may not know as much as we thought we did. Knowledge obtained through observation and personal experience, you are continually finding out and getting to know. Literally, that's the meaning of it. You are continually finding out. It's a learning process. It never stops. And the more knowledge you accumulate, the more confident you are in what you know. Testing. The word testing produces patience. The American Standard Version, I don't know if you have a copy of it. I prefer that translation over any other English translation, personally. It doesn't mean the other ones aren't good, they are. This is just the one I prefer. I think the wording is more descriptive of the original language. James, what they say in James here, knowing that the proving of your faith worketh patience. The word worketh. It's present tense, of course. It keeps on working, and it produces more and more patience. It means to work out, to accomplish, to bring about. It's got a lot more flavor to it than the word produces does. Producer, you got your product. When you're working something out, you're constantly working, constantly gaining knowledge, because it's a process. It's not just an action, it's actually a process. In Philippians 2 and 12, Paul said the same thing. Beloved, as you have always obeyed, not as much in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. A lot of people don't like the word work in Christian religion. They think the word work is a bad word. If you work out your own salvation, that means you somehow earn your own salvation. That's not true. We can work out our own salvation without earning our salvation. We work out our own salvation by meeting the requirements of grace. Grace demands certain things. And in order for me to receive grace, I've got to develop these certain things in my life. Therefore, we work out our salvation. We try to qualify for divine grace. And once we do, all is well. We don't get divine grace just because we're breathing. That, I think, is the common belief with many people, but that's not true. There are many people who are breathing, but they're not getting divine grace, not in the sense of salvation. They're receiving grace in the sense that it rains on them. They're receiving grace in the sense that they may have jobs and are able to make a living. But as far as being saved, they're not receiving that. That's something that they have to qualify for. And it's not just being human that qualifies us. The end product, of course, here is patience. Luke 21:19, the Lord said, by your patience possess your souls. That's a thought that doesn't come up that often, I don't think. But the possession of our souls, the salvation of our souls, is dependent largely upon our patience. If we have no patience, we're going to put our own souls in jeopardy, because it's by our patience that we possess our soul. We have control of our soul. We have control over the flesh. Patience enables us to do this. Patience is a product we really, really want to develop. It never was a virtue I ever had until my later years. I didn't understand how important it was, really. But patience is a most excellent virtue, and we have to learn to possess patience, and it makes life easier, too. It's better to be patient than to be a hothead. Being a hothead gives you a headache. Trials prove faith by enabling the believer to determine the extent and degree of their willingness to endure and be obedient to the Christ. How much do I trust Jesus? The trial will show me. How much do I believe in Jesus? The trial is going to show me. How far will I go to obey Jesus? The trial is going to show me. Abraham offered up his son Isaac. How much confidence and trust did he have in Jesus? Well, he had a whole bunch. He believed that the Lord could bring him back to life. So he was going to willingly take his life. I think that's about the nth of trust and faith that a human can possess. But Abraham didn't know that until after he offered up Isaac. Do you understand? God knew how much Abraham trusted him. The test wasn't for God's sake. There's nothing God doesn't know. He knows the end from the beginning. He knew how the test would turn out. He knew how Abraham would fare. It was Abraham that didn't know. And the Lord wanted him to know how much faith he actually had. So he put him through the test, and Abraham learned something about himself he didn't know before. There was great value in that trial, though it had to be full of anxiety to offer up the son of promise. I can't even imagine what that man must have gone through. But his faith was greater. He had more confidence in God than he had doubt. And he offered up Isaac. That's what you get back from trials. So they are very valuable. We learn something about ourselves. You've heard me tell the tale when I was over in India one time, a guy come through the door with a machete. And I thought he might use that machete on me. I thought he was mad. And I was tempted to change my subject that I was preaching on. I think I was on false God, stuff like that. And I thought, I don't know if I should be talking about this right now. Guy's got that knife. And I thought about chickening out, but I didn't chicken out. I would have been too ashamed to do that. So I took my chances, and I just kept preaching on what I was talking about, and that man obeyed the gospel that day. Anyway, I learned something about myself I didn't know before. I hoped I would do that. I didn't know if I would because I'd never been through it. But after that day, I knew I would stay the course, even though I thought it might be a bad day, for me at least. And I learned something about me. That's the way trials work. You learn something about yourself if you're successful. If you fail, you learn something about yourself you don't want to know. I know myself, and if I had failed that day, I would have had guilt coming out my ears for letting the Lord down. I'm glad I didn't do that. Okay, let patience have its perfect work. Jesus, we read about his work also. In Hebrews 2:10, it was fitting for Jesus, for whom are all things and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings. Jesus was made perfect. I thought Jesus was perfect. Well, he was perfect. How could he be made perfect if he was perfect? Well, we're talking about perfect in a different sense right here. Jesus was perfect in the sense that he was sinless. But there were some things that he lacked. He lacked, for example, an experience that was going to be invaluable to his followers. And that experience was going to be that he knows what life is like because he went through the things we went through. He went through worse things than we went through. And we know that he can empathize with us. He knows what it's like. He knows what the fear is like. We're not dealing with a Lord who doesn't understand us, but to the contrary, one who does understand us very well. These sufferings made him perfect, complete, total, entire, would be the meaning of the word here, in every sense, through his sufferings. Brought to maturity is one definition. That was the plan for which he came into the world. He lived a little over 3 years in his ministry. It appears 2.5, 3.5 years, somewhere in there. He lived his ministry that long. He lived in totality 32, 33 years. And the purpose of it is to go from a baby to a full-grown man and live the experiences that any other man would live. I've always wondered if that's the reason Joseph wasn't around when Jesus was a grown man. You know, the Lord didn't have his own family. Could it be that Joseph may have died and the young Jesus stepped in and took his place in raising and caring for a family? Is it possible? I don't know. I think it's possible. We know that Joseph had at least 6 kids with Mary. And yet, when we read about the ministry time of the Lord, he's not in the picture anywhere. It appears that he likely died, and perhaps Jesus played the role of father for a while, thus qualifying him even further for his role in life as one who understands what we go through. I don't know what all he was qualified in, all the various aspects of the human life, but you can find different things that he most likely experienced for the sake of qualifying for his role as the perfect sacrifice on behalf of man. That's what the word perfect means anyway. He became complete in all these various ways. The word perfect appears again in the same sentence, verse 4. Let patience have its perfect work. Let patience complete what it's supposed to complete. Why? That you may be perfect, entire, lacking nothing. Okay? You've qualified in every aspect of life. So you got the word perfect twice in the same sentence, but they have different meanings both times. And then also you have the word complete. What do you do when the baby's born? First thing you do, count their fingers and their toes, don't you? Make sure we got 10 fingers and 10 toes. Why? Making sure all the parts are there. You want to make sure all the parts are present. That's what the word complete means. You want to make sure all the parts are there. And all the parts are there when you go through an experience like this. You're lacking nothing. You're whole in every sense of the word. That brings us to number 2, wisdom and faith. Now, I've skipped a lot of stuff in this. If there's something that you want to know, just get my attention and we'll go over it. But there's a lot of things I'm not bringing up in this class because I don't think there's any value to it to bother you with it at this stage of the game. But there might be. And if there is, just let me know. Wisdom and faith, verses 5 through 8. The question that most people come up with now, how is it possible for me to see a blessing in such trials? How could I possibly see a blessing? I couldn't. For a long time, I couldn't. In time, I did learn. I had to get knowledge. I did learn. But for a right small while, I had no idea what the blessing could be. Well, if you lack wisdom, James says, ask God. Don't ask the preacher, ask God. If you lack wisdom, just go to God. It's as though James is saying the answer to this question can only come from God. So ask Him. If you lack wisdom, you don't understand what those verses 2 through 4 means, which most don't understand, ask God. And God will give you an answer. Do you find it interesting that it doesn't say anything about asking a teacher? Asking your preacher? Asking an apostle? Just ask God. That's where your answer will come from. if you want to understand how trials are beneficial. Just ask God. The answer is not inherent. That's the meaning of it. The answer isn't within us. It didn't come with a package. We don't know why trials are beneficial. We just don't. We don't have any idea why trials are beneficial. There's only one way we could possibly know the benefit of a trial, and that's by asking God. That information has to come from a source beyond ourselves, because the answer is not in us. We need help. It has to be learned. And usually, as we've just been studying, one of the best ways to learn is to experience it. We got revelation that tells us there's a benefit to it. Now, perhaps, it's time to experience it. And between knowledge and experience, we may begin to understand. I say begin because it's only the beginning. But the Lord, He knows how to arrange that. The preacher doesn't, the teacher doesn't, the apostle didn't. That's something the Lord does. So ask Him. It's the only place I know in the Bible that has such a blunt answer that way. Webster says, wisdom, the ability to judge soundly, deal sagaciously with facts, especially as they relate to life and conduct, discernment and judgment, discretion and sagacity. Knowledge is the possession of facts. Wisdom, the ability to soundly judge the facts. You can have the facts and be wrong. A lot of people do. A lot of people in our brotherhood do. They've got the facts, but they've drawn the wrong conclusion. They see things that aren't present. They see things that aren't there. You can name most any subject in worship, for example, and there are groups of Christians who have different beliefs as to how the act is to be carried out. Eating the Lord's Supper, for example. You've heard about the people that thought you had to put a sheet over the Lord's Supper, or you weren't taking the Lord's Supper in the right manner. You've heard of people that's supposed to take the Lord's Supper at the end of the service and not at the beginning of the service, or at the beginning of the service and not at the end of the service. And if you do it the other way, you're wrong. There's many people who have the facts, but they have misjudged the facts. They misunderstand what the facts are teaching, what can be learned, and they wind up creating problems in the church. And that's very sad. But it's very common also. We'll stop here and take up with verse 5, God willing, next week.